Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
It's Saturday night.
Konnichiwa.
Exactly. Time of the weekly dig. For anyone new to the stream, this is a live show where we dig into anime old and new. In this case, starting with something old. I'm Brent. These are my fabulous co-hosts, John. Say hi, John.
Konnichiwa. Hi, John.
And Steve.
Hola, ¿qué tal?
There we go. Nice.
La biblioteca.
So let us start our dig tonight by analyzing an anime OVA we all watched this week, Dallos.
Dun dun dun.
Yes.
Dun 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 dun.
Wonderfully dramatic music.
Exactly. So if you're in the chat, please let us know if you've seen Dallos and kind of what your initial impressions were of that. Yeah, we're gonna get into Dallos here and talk a little bit about that. This is an OVA, actually the first OVA, which came out in '83. I just realized I said that, and a little bit in the back of my mind is saying, was it 80? It was '83. Good. Kind of came out in '83, because the release schedule of this was kind of funky. They released episode 2 first, and then came back and made episode 1 and released that to explain what was going on, because apparently folks were confused. And I don't.
At least they
see
were
anything...
very responsive to the audience,
exactly.
Right?
I don't see anything about this in the Wikipedia article or the other stuff I looked into, and I've not been able to find a reference for this, but I have seen like the images. Apparently, parts of it were initially released incomplete. They were so far behind schedule, they would just throw like storyboards in there, or just like inked but not colored sequences, just to get it out the door. So yeah, it had issues, but apparently it did. They did eventually go back in and finish it up and all that kind of stuff. But yeah. Oh boy.
Well, I almost swear, in the last 5 years, I've seen some anime where they've done that flip out of the actual animation.
Oh yeah.
To storyboard to like super highlight what's going on and like really sort of very artsy a fight or something that's happening and just the wild ability to sketch it out with storyboards. And that's very interesting that they didn't do it artistically. They were right out of time. Like, nice.
Apparently. So yeah. And I the artwork's something I definitely want to talk about, Jay, because that's definitely a very fundamental aspect to this. I think one of its appeals is that this is just, boy, this is a 1980s sci-fi anime.
It's something.
Yeah.
It's something.
It's something. So let's start as we normally do. So I had heard of Dallos a while back, tracked down a copy, watched it some years ago. My impressions have not changed since then, but we'll get to that in a little bit. John, what was your exposure to Dallos?
You said there's an OVA called Dallos, and we're watching it next week. Ta-da!
Cool.
Other than knowing, that Oshii was involved with it, that I had never. It's never even come up as like, oh, these are some of the important films, OVAs you should watch. That word has never crossed any screen that I've seen.
No,
at any
there
con.
hasn't.
So I was like, oh, Dallas. Okay, Dallas. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like Dallas when JR got shot. Oh,
Right.
Dallos.
Dallos.
Oh, gotcha. So that was my experience. You said we were watching it.
Yeah. Steve, how about you?
So my first experience was with Otakon,
Nice.
and it in of course one of the video rooms, and I sat down and I was watching it, and I it makes sense now that he started with episode 2 instead of 1, because I literally thought, I was like, did I miss something? Did I watch this out of order? What's going on here? And much like many horrible train wrecks, where you see the things but you just can't look away. I stayed there for it because the panels. It was like, okay, we're going to show all 4 4 episodes because it was 30 minutes, so that's like the 2-hour chunk that it does. When I sat there, and at the end of it, where it was just like we're all just like walking out and just kind of going,
what did we? Wait, we did it for 2 hours. Why?
Why was I drawn to this? Why did I not want to leave? Because that's actually the most important question. Why did I not want to stop watching it? Now, since then, I have watched it again, and of course, it's the most recent iteration, i.e., last night. Again, I was just like going, okay, I'll just skip through because I've seen this a few times, and then I found myself just watching the whole thing, and I was just like going, and at the end of it, I was just like, why did I do this again?
It's one of the fascinating things. Jay in the chat, I think you kind of nailed it. It is classic science fiction. And it has all of the, not just the tropes, but kind of the structure of classic science fiction. So there are so many things in here where they kind of dangle in front of you to say, here's a thing that we're going to resolve later. Here's something else we're going to resolve later. And then they never do. But
you're grasping at the strings, right? Going, "Oh, please, God, give me some."
Yeah, but they pull you along all this stuff all the way. So, basic concept I like to say is organized labor in space. Basically, yeah, thank you.
If I'm gonna have organized labor miners in space, I want the Great Space Miner show.
Mighty Space Miners.
Yes, the Mighty Space Miners.
I couldn't stop thinking
of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Which also had a troubled release, ironically. But yeah, so set on the moon in the future, obviously, where there is a large labor force working there, and they're feeling increasingly disenfranchised, and there's increasing strikes and violence and so forth, and so it's this sort of cat and mouse game between the revolutionaries and the government, particularly Alex, who is brought in to deal with this. And I say Shar because it's the same voice actor, like just straight up.
Oh wow, I never even noticed that.
Yeah, it's literally Shuji Ikeda.
Damn. Okay.
And so he comes in to sort of clean all this up and fails miserably. And so that's one of the things I think that makes the OVA legitimately interesting is that is how it is about this sort of unrest between the labor class in a way that I think is very relatable. Like, they do manage to layer in this plot line that all these people were shipped up here, decades ago to start everything, and the capital investment was just unimaginable. And so the resources on the moon are kind of minimal by definition. Like, you just don't have a lot to work with. And so they've been working. Well, now you have new generations who just grew up on the moon. They have no connection to Earth. They have no particular feelings for Earth. But they're still working and feeling really frustrated. And so...
well, there was a point where they are at a park, and there is a giant statue.
Mm-hmm.
And the statue
shows,
like, the base of the statue looks like it's got continents on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see the sculpture is just human bodies climbing like a pillar to something that is cratered that looks like the moon. Yep. And they did a great job at showing it and never once addressing it.
Right.
Walked right away from it. It's like, this is a seminal point. You could be like, this was the investment made. This is why Earth is so obviously invested in this.
Mm-hmm.
And they walk away from it. Where it's like, damn it.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah, because the most explanation you get is a 4-minute explanation of Alex showing his girlfriend, whatever, in the
Melinda
in the hovercraft ski thing, and he goes, and we're just shooting stones up, into space, into this big processing unit. So all we're doing is just like, we should have Tonka toys and we're just making things up in space. And life is horrible, and the miners want better whatevers, and and Doc McCoy. God, so many Star Trek jokes right there.
I'm a doctor, not a minor. Or wait a minute, I'm a minor, not a doctor.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you just lose so much, and it's just like almost a Shin-Chan moment for me, because when Shin-Chan makes his demands like a labor union worker, and then when he doesn't get to, he's like sulks off into the corner. That's kind of what I felt like about these guys, the Lunarians. They're just like, we want our
Yeah, I'm not sure I was aware of seeing any like, here's corporate overlords like knocking the miners and stuff around. It's like, no, they're upset. They obviously have demands, and we don't see anything. It's like any kind of I totally get. I sympathize with them. Their working conditions are terrible. It's like we hardly see anything.
Yeah,
you don't see anything, but you know what you do see? You see it. You see the parks. You see the idyllic. Waterfalls that defy the moon's gravity.
Yeah,
and
and Area 3, which is a terrible, horrible slum, which is like under this great big blue dome. It looks like it's very nice with the swans.
and with the swans at the park where you can ride a Ferris wheel. Of course, in moon gravity, because
that's how that works.
That's the thing, because
maybe they altered the moon's gravity. I don't know. There are so many things they never mentioned.
Well, if you have a giant machine buried in the moon, the moon could be a giant machine. In which case, it has gravity rules all to itself, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's totally understood right there,
Absolutely.
right?
Sure.
Sure. And that's the thing, is that there are so many different interesting ideas in here, and so it should be pointed out. There's very much a Moon is Zahar's mistress vibe to the story.
Right.
Very similar basic plot. The moon does not have an atmosphere, at least. They're all under domes.
We hear the wind blow.
We hear the wind blow, so it's weird.
That's just gas escaping.
Yeah, there we are.
Well, good to know.
Yeah. And so you have that. But you also have, it's odd. Let me see if I can find here all our characters.
Odds a word.
Yeah.
Uninformative would be another.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you have the whole setup here. I'm trying to find. Gosh, it does take a long time to start all of this. There we go. So we're introduced to our protagonist, Shun, who is a mechanically minded teenager who isn't really aware of his surroundings and prefers to tinker with things. Who then interacts.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, well, then this cute girl who's kind of a neighbor girl shows up, who kind of has a thing for him, and kind of tries to kind of ground him a little bit in what he's doing. He kind of ignores her and works on his machines,
like most teenage boys on the moon,
exactly,
who are minors.
And you have your serious overseer who's Shar, and it's very clear that like everybody on this project had seen Mobile Suit Gundam when it came out 4 years prior, and are very much sort of copying from that script. The trouble is we never really see Shun's emotional development. One of the reasons why Amuro works is because he starts off as this kind of this immature kid thrown into this difficult situation who then does what needs to be done, but then over the course of time, the pressure kind of builds and builds and builds, and he kind of breaks at various times. And that kind of works dramatically, but here you don't really get any of that. He's just kind of this teenager who's pulled into all of this, and then just kind of wanders around watching what's going on. And occasionally fighting and such, but there's none of that exposure.
Well, he half-heartedly participates in stuff, and then it just is sort of swept along more than he has his own sort of like power motive to go and do anything.
Exactly.
Like, good job, kid. I would also argue that obviously people Gundam as an influence, but also character design. If you think of Oji-chan, the grandpa, he looks an awful lot like the captain of the space battleship Yamato.
I didn't see that personally.
For his, the full like connective beard, where it's like it's not like a genuinely well done beard. It's just kind of glued onto the man's face.
Okay, yeah.
It looks an awful lot like who from Star Blazers I do with Captain Avatar.
Mm-hmm. So I kept thinking Nanook of the North, honestly.
Oh, it could be as well
with the glasses. You know?
Which I mean, for a lot of this, stylistically for the '80s. Pretty much, you could say every series just like nibbled at every other series.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So Grandpa, he's got a very much that sort of unibeard, especially with the rigid mouth line that Captain Avatar had with his beard that hid his mouth. So you know, they probably this entire thing is like the bastard child of like a lot of stuff going on.
Absolutely. Well, and you know, the mechanical designs feel pretty Macross-esque.
Yeah.
The way all of them work.
All the way down to the sound effects.
Yeah.
I mean, the sound effects are 100% every like sci-fi kind of Macross-y kind of noise, that kind of noises. I'm like, wow, you guys stole that entirely. That's awesome.
Yeah. And granted, Macross had only come out a year before this. So it was the hot new property. It was the hot new thing. Everybody had seen it.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you're going to see
all
the
those
best.
Are Foley operators the people that make noises? Is that what Foley people are? I imagine that when this, you know, came up as like, oh, we got a sci-fi extravaganza, the people who were like the Foley artists for Macross were like, we have an entire sound catalog. Would you like to buy it? So it felt a lot like that.
Yeah. It would be fascinating to go back and find out. And I know they did release. There was a like making of documentary released with this at some point, like in Japanese. I'd love to go back and find out like the production history behind this and like, you know, what they were pulling from, how much money they had, you know, all that stuff. Because this definitely feels, and the budget's not low by any stretch. It's a perfectly solid anime budget. But it does feel like they're
drunk.
Well, we came up with this description a while back, which I really really love, which is
nice.
It is all sorts of interesting elements, none of which come together. Right, where it's like these characters are very generic, but they're very standard anime characters, like. You know, in and of themselves, it's fine. The setting is interesting. It has interesting elements to it, interesting bits to it. You know, the mecha designs are cool, all that kind of stuff. But just it kind of wanders off into nowhere.
Well, even for the mecha designs, they're good. They're not great.
True.
They're not terrible.
Yeah.
They're just solidly good.
Well, and they have this interesting situation where they're clearly trying to set up the idea that you have the kind of sleek, Earth-designed ships with like the patrol craft, and then the miners are all reconfiguring the pieces they have and all their equipment, this very industrial equipment to make all this happen. And so you really only get two cool designs. The hover police unit things. What were the decompilers? I think they were called. Whatever they were. Degraders, something like that. I don't know.
Degraders. That's not something good for your police force to drive. Bring out the degraders. Let's show these miners what's going on. Like,
debugger. I think that was the
debugger.
name I saw in mine.
As if that was any better.
Yeah.
It's not much better, but
yeah, exactly. Which are, and we talked about this, before the streams started. These are hover ships that have perfect hovering capabilities, and they can hover anywhere they want to. You know, move up, down, left, right, full degrees of freedom, all that. Just sit right wherever they want to, and they have legs.
So in the subway scene, when they're like, "Oh, he's at the other platform," they're like, "Yeah, all right, we're gonna do a 90-degree turn with all these people below us, and we're just gonna go." And they're like, all the people are just like, but you don't see any like, wind backwash, from
jet wash,
or anything like that. And it was just like, I'm like going, wow, that's can I have something that can make that tight of a turn?
Exactly.
But it's helpful to have legs that look like a was it T-89 or what was it? Was it from
the Walker?
Oh, the ATSTs. The
Yeah,
Walker, yes.
the RoboCop.
What was that
Yep.
name? Yeah.
RoboCop.
209. Ed 209. Yeah.
Ed 209. That's it.
Should also be pointed out there's a pretty strong spinner from Blade Runner resemblance as well.
Okay. Yep.
You know, especially being hovering, police cars basically.
Yeah.
But like you say, Jay, it's the artwork does feel like an old G.I. Joe cartoon a lot of the times, but it's still like well put together artwork, right? Like it doesn't feel out of place for the setting and so forth.
Oh, for 1983, this is entirely right in the smack zone for the animes that were of extant at the time. So it's entirely acceptable.
And this is when G.I. Joe came out. Like, the animators drawing this were probably drawing G.I. Joe at the same time. They're probably working on that show.
As I was saying,
one or two Dallos frames, a couple of G.I. Joe frames. Oops.
As I was saying last night to Brent, when the G.I. Joe came up, I was just like, all right, guys, bust those Union miners. Go Joe.
Well, and I have to say, I think when we got the infamous moon skiing paratroopers in, see if I can get no, they all, wow, was that really episode 3 where they all came in?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, because he's all busted up. Where is that? I need to show you all.
And they did some going where they were under.
There we go.
For some reason, jungle tarp camouflage
on the moon,
on the gray moons. I don't know.
Yeah,
with the wind blowing.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, they took effort with that
to
make sure that was done well. So I would almost say that some of those fight scenes in that.
Yeah.
They actually spent more time trying to get it just in the right place and time.
Totally.
Whereas the rest of it was entirely 1983.
Yeah, and I do think some of these designs very much felt like, well, first off, it was Mask more than anything else. Wonder if they were working on that.
That's terrible.
Working
oh God!
Fighting crime.
Now I'll never see this again, the same way. I'll be looking at this thing the whole time. Who's got the Corvette that converts and flies? Damn it!
And these do just look like when G.I. Joe kind of got to that point where just they'd really run out of all of their original ideas and were just like, okay, let's kit bash 3 things together and push out that. This kind of feels like that. So
the moment they jump the shark,
yes,
if you will.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Something vaguely stormtrooper-esque, ski paratrooper, cool.
Yeah, with kabuki mask, it's all. Yeah, it's awesome. Fine.
But did you notice that they actually did make an effort to make them look like alpine skiers, or
absolutely,
yeah. And it was just like I was just like, okay, that's nice, but it's the moon.
Now, with that helmet design in this shot, is that vaguely Zaku looking?
Yeah, I would say in general.
I mean, kind of the chunky shoulder and the sort of rounded helmet portion.
A little bit.
So,
and again, I wouldn't. When I say they were probably working on G.I. Joe, that's not a joke. It's a joke. But these companies were working on G.I. Joe at the time too. Toei animated that show.
Yeah.
So it is certainly possible that they were kind of like, oh, that looks cool.
Well, this also reminds me of the bike armor from Genesis.
Oh, Mosqueda. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that look in and of itself is like, wow, this has kind of got a little bit of Southern Cross and a little bit of Mosqueda going on with it. I'm like, aha.
Yeah. One of the other things that's kind of a difficulty, actually, I'll see if I can show you here. Because it was really noticeable in the shot where they're suiting up. There we go. And it's kind of hard to see with everything else going on. But one of the drawbacks of the art style is that there are a lot of sequences where instead of doing shadows, it's just black. So you can see on their suits, there's just kind of these just large just sort of black areas of just black nothingness. which can sometimes work, but in this case, because it is so very early 80s, it can kind of feel a little awkward visually. You just have these sort of inky black spots all over the place, while everything else is relatively bright by those standards. So, again, not bad. It's just one of those things where I think it's a stylistic choice that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. Because it should be pointed out, so Hisayuki Tsuruyumi was the director of the first episode. He actually did Gotcha Man back in the day, apparently.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then, so he did episode 1, while Oshii did episode 2. And then apparently they did basically, alternate work on it from that point on. And that's not episode 1. There we go. That's when I start with episode 2. That's why. Because it starts with this sort of flashback to what was going on, and it's this moody, dark, serious storyline about these guys. I mean, it opens with this long sequence of these two men, unnamed. One of them is slumped over. The other is just mechanically loading shells into a magazine.
An impossible number of shells to be held in
It's
one hand.
It just
Yeah.
I'm like going, okay, we have 33. Okay.
Yeah. Keep on going.
Like you can hold maybe 5 at a shot as you're putting them in, but no, he manages to hold a magical number that just keep appearing in his hand.
Yep.
Like,
And then he takes one out and he kind of looks at it and sort of pocket.
I actually really like that moment because it's dirty.
Yeah.
And he picks it up and he goes, oh, and he just kind of,
wipes it.
Wipes it off and puts it in.
Yeah.
Like, why would you?
Why do you care? You're going to die.
Right.
And you never know what's going on with the next guy. He just looks depressed and like oh, woe is me. And you find out that he's like,
He's
brain
been
dead.
Yeah, for 2 hours.
For 2 hours. And it's just like, wait, what?
Yeah.
When did that happen?
And this is the thing, is that, again, if this is your introduction to Dallos, this is a pretty crackerjack opening. Because you watch this and you're like, you want to know what's happening. You want to know what's going on, right? And you're pulled into the scenario, and then you get to meet Alex, you get to meet all these characters in this tense standoff. We see Shun, we see Rachel, we see all these characters sort of brought in. And it's just this big police action all of a sudden. Very Pat Labor, actually.
Well, also, too, the thermal imaging thing.
Yeah.
All I could hear in the background of my mind was Megazone 2-3, and you see the images of people behind the walls. I'm like,
Well, and Ghost in the Shell, very much as well, later on.
There's a lot of interesting influences running around there.
Very much. And then you get things like so this is where it gets, in my opinion, Oshii Wonderful Absurdity, where the police start firing and you get this cascade of shells coming down the stairs.
Yeah.
And
I was like, I'm just watching. I'm just like going, and I know that's all right. No, wait, no.
It's a very subtle commentary on police violence. Very subtle.
Yeah.
Very subtle.
The deafening roar that would be that much firing. Like, holy crap.
Yeah.
But that comes up in one of the Pat Labor. I forget if it's the movie or the show, and where there's that scene where it's the shell casings dropping, and you hear that noise. It's very, very, very Pat Labor, and it did remind me of that. But still, it just felt like the tsunami of copper shells coming down the. Going and again, I have to say it again. Gravity.
Right. Yeah, it's fine.
They're all magnetized somehow to near this.
Sure. Yeah. No, and that's the thing is that you move forward into this into the story, and it is a very Oshii opening, which is ironic because Oshii wasn't doing any of this yet, right? He hadn't made Ghost in the Shell. He was working on Beautiful Dreamers, I think, at the time. All of these staples of Oshii are really being formed here.
Yeah.
In this weird little sci-fi story, and you get introduced to Alex and the council and so forth and so on. And so like there are all these elements of the show where I'm like, there's something here, and I enjoy it. I enjoy it itself, but then when you start connecting all the dots, it just kind of falls apart. It's frustrating.
Yeah, the entire council and the interconnected elements of the minor society with the guys on the council and the Lunarians and Earth and blah blah blah. They explore none of it, or at least I should say they don't explore it to the extent that this could have gone on, like and had very much like Gundam. Yeah. The political ramifications, the interconnectedness of individual people plus their offices. That this just for 4-episode OVA just did not have the capacity to address that in a way that I'm kind of surprised they didn't just go for more action and just sort of slide this to the side and be like, we don't have time to develop that. So let's just go with the total action fighting for 30 minutes and see what happens.
Nope. It's a shame because I think there's all the pieces are there. It feels. I'll bet the novelization of this would be amazing. Yeah. Give me time to delve into all those characters, all that situation. That would be great. But they just don't do any of that here. And it's tough because, like I was saying before, I find the basic premise, and one thing I really appreciate about this OVA is how messy and human a lot of it was, where like the miners intellectually understand why they're there but don't feel it anymore, right? The council is like, our jobs are to make sure that we keep the public order, and you're not doing that anymore, so we have to stop you. Whether we agree with you or not, this is what has to happen. And we don't really understand why you would do this. Why are you so angry? Alex is thrown into all of this as this Earthling to come in and kind of solve the problem, and it's not going to happen. Like everybody knows it. We've all been in work situations where somebody gets pulled in to solve everything and gets dropped in the middle of a situation, and it's like, no, that's not going to solve it. And he knows it, but he's kind of doing his best. This is what I think is right, and he's doing that thing. So all those pieces are there, but again, because they're trying to tell an action story and political drama and, dark philosophical thing, and Dallos is a god, and oh, by the way, there's a giant alien robot face on the dark side of the moon that we just found one day, but we think humans built it, but we don't know.
Yeah.
But what the hell? We're going to worship it as a god anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. Whatever.
That's like that was going to be the 5th OVA. It was the scientific background to Dallos, the thing, and it didn't happen. So.
And Jay, I think you're absolutely right. As a TV series, that's what this needed. This needed to be a TV series. Because it has all the pieces for it, right? You have all these different elements. Right. Obviously, there's some blood and guts, but that can be, that can be put into the DVD.
The director's cut.
Exactly.
Well, it's funny is that when at Otakon, speaking of the guts part of this, is that at the death panels at Otakon. The death panels. Dallos was always on these panels because they had some of the most glorious death scenes, in there. Okay. And the guy exploding, his face exploding inside the capsule, people being sucked out. And see, that's the thing I didn't understand. One of the scenes where it's just like they're being sucked out of the ship, but they have their suits on, but they still implode inside.
Yeah.
And, things like that. And it's just like various things where it's just like, this is so totally not needed. Mm-hmm. But everything else is just, we don't get anything. So let's just throw something at the audience.
Right. Let's shock the audience back awake.
Right. Yeah.
Are you sleeping? Hey, death.
Yeah. Oh, what? Look at that horrible thing. What's going on here?
And I think that is also, very much a reference back to Macross and like the very bloody deaths in Macross.
Right.
Which they if folks are curious, they edited down for the Robotech series because it was literally too hot for TV. But yeah, it felt like that to a very great degree. And so, yeah. And then there's the music.
Yes, there is.
So, that opening is the most dramatic piece of music ever made.
It's amazing.
Slight hyperbole.
Wish they had lived up to it.
It's bizarre because a lot of the times the music is, I'll call it inoffensive, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, it's there, it fits, it's fine.
Right.
Other times, there's one scene in here, and it doesn't matter what the visual is, where they have this really tense action scene, and they're playing this sort of like disco jazz number.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, disco jazz number and 80s pop synth.
Yes.
And it was just like, I'm like going, and people are getting blown up and having shards going in their eyes and stuff like that. And you're just like oh,
I can't wait to buy the soundtrack.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not ironic. Like, it's not setting it up that, Sam Peckinpah, Glory of Violence or anything. No. It's just, that's the soundtrack they put onto this. It's,
Maybe they commissioned the soundtrack before the show. Then it was one of those like, well, we slide this piece to there and this. We've got one left over. Where should we put it? How about this dramatic scene?
Yep.
Sure. Just go with that.
Yeah.
All I know is that when I went to bed last night, I did it in the most dramatic fashion.
Exactly. So there are two composers credited on this. I'm going to see if I can find more. Honestly, I did not look this up ahead of time. Oh, come on. Hold on. I asked it to search, and it didn't. There we go. Oh, interesting. Really? That's not helpful. Sorry. We're doing an all Japanese site, which is always great. Nope, that's not it either. He is not a character in Power Rangers. I mean, he probably is, but that's not the one I'm looking for. There we go.
The character's been recycled. I gotcha.
Exactly. Oh, wow! Okay. I did not expect that. That's interesting. Sorry. Weird connection here. One of the composers, Hiroyuki Namba, went on to do the soundtracks for Starship Troopers, Armitage the Third, Burn Up W, Transformers Car Robot, the 2003 series, and a little show called Space Dandy.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, I'm going to click through. This is all Wikipedia, so who knows. One of many composers. They basically got a different composer for every episode. This is the composer for, let's see if we can find out. So this is Hiroyuki Namba. Season 1, episodes 1, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 12. So, good chunk of it.
Yeah. No joke.
Cool. Apparently known for his synth style, which, yes, very much so. The other guy, Ichiro Nita, assume it's a guy, did a couple of things. He did Sakigake Otoko Juko, the movie, which is one of those, high school for delinquents with a ridiculously powerful student council who gives them terrible punishments and ridiculous punishments, and they have to rise back against the man. One of those.
Okay.
And a bunch of other various things like that. He did the Area 88 OVA. He did Nanako SOS. But he also did the music for Sukiban Deka. Sukiban Deka is again, sort of this... I will give you the description from IMDb. Neo-Nazis take over a school, turning it into a training camp by attempting with a coup d'etat. Sukiban Deka should stop him, but it seems impossible if she's alone. Anyway,
Wow.
Sukeban Deka is it's a girl who fights back against this stuff with a yo-yo, and she uses this like yo-yo to kill things. Here's the thing:
it's fighting neo-Nazis with a yo-yo.
This was massive. This was a huge thing. It's referenced in Lucky Star.
Oh wow!
And the end credit sequence of Kill la Kill is an almost shot-for-shot remake of the end credit sequence of Sukeban Deka.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a really big deal, and like when people mention, and this is actually somebody in maybe Joe, it was you, who mentioned Sukeban Deka and said, just keep your eye out for this. Like, you know, when you hear that. There's another recent comedy where a bunch of girls all show up as sort of delinquents in various sort of outfits, and one of them is Sukeban Deka in this scene in this anime. So yeah, it's just a common thing. Anyway, nothing to do with Dallos, just an interesting connection.
It makes Dallos more interesting.
Yeah, exactly, which we needed.
Sort of.
And this is the weird thing about Dallos is that, again, all of these pieces are there, but then we get to the ending.
Is it?
Well, I use ending in only the most dictionary sense, and it does stop. It does
we
end.
get to the point where it stops.
Right.
Like,
And again, so have you guys seen Shirobako?
Yes.
In the chat, have you guys seen Shirobako? There is a storyline in Shirobako, which is an anime series set at an anime studio, where they're trying to finish this anime series, and they have to like lock the director in a cell to make him, write the ending and actually figure out what the ending's going to be.
Yeah.
Oh boy, does this ending feel like Oshii going, what do I do? What do I do? How do I... Let's just go philosophical. We'll just go full philosophical. He'll just go out into the wilderness. We'll have shots, big moody shots of the earth and all of his destroyed buildings, and he'll talk to himself a lot, and that's my ending.
And graves and stuff.
Graves and things, and Uncle dies, and Shun becomes part of it. Because it's the story arc we all should have known was going on, but didn't because it wasn't. Was that it was Shun transforming from an oblivious miner worker, happily, blithely mining stones to send up into space.
Yeah, stones.
And
not
stones,
gold.
Not gold. Not
freaking,
lithium.
And no actual precious mineral. Nope. Stones. Mm-hmm. Earth is short of stones.
Mm-hmm. Oh. Because that's how Earth is powered now. Stones. So Shun goes through
we need sidewalks. Massive amounts of sidewalks. We hear you.
And Shun goes through this whole non-existent story arc of him becoming a rebel, where he stands in the middle of the grave of all the Lunarians and shouting, shaking his fist at Earth, and why did you abandon us and all this stuff? And then then you have Doc talking for 5 minutes, and he goes, and his friend is just like, okay, nothing happened, nothing changed. He's like the realist. He's like, okay, absolutely nothing happened. Mm-hmm. And Doc is like, no, don't you see the fires of rebellion? Shut up. Shut up.
Yeah.
You lost the battle. And there's a scene that's supposed to tug at your heart where he's calling out his comrades' names and no one's answering. Mm-hmm. And you just don't care.
Yeah. And again, it's one of those things. Oh, but I really want to do how we do it on this, because that ending scene could have been this scene showing how pathetic Dog is. Of like, no, I've got this. I know this. We're all good. But it's played so straight. You feel like, well, maybe he's right. I don't know. But if they played it like, this is the cycle of violence, right? But and you get all these perspectives, and then the whole montage at the end of all these characters kind of doing their thing. Yeah, it's
and when they're going through the credits, like the credits were actually, in all seriousness, the credits were actually gave any of Dallas any credibility, because it actually shows them, like Shun actually becoming the rebel. his girlfriend, I guess. Is also learning how to, under Doc's tutelage, Rachel.
Oh, Rachel.
Tutelage to, become a terrorist. and then at the end of it, is of course they have to ruin it because they have to bring in the poor dog.
Poor dog.
And cybernetic enhanced dog that was Alex's pet, and the dog just does the dumbest damn howl. It sounded like a Wookiee being emasculated. It was like just. You're just like it's supposed to be like the final dramatic point. You're just like,
yeah.
And that's when Dallos rises. No, not at all.
You get nothing.
Switches on.
Yeah.
The lights come on, so that's important.
Let's flip this switch. We have lights. Awesome.
Yeah.
Now the Earth knows where to shoot their missiles. Oh, that's a bad plan.
That's a very bad plan, yes.
Dallas just wakes up and goes, "F this noise, what?"
So, I do want to talk about one thing with all of this. I do believe that Dallos is a metaphor for the Japanese businessman.
Dallos the god or the show?
The show.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
He's powered, but he doesn't have any sort of control.
Hey, there we are. So I think there's a fairly clear line you can draw here, a fairly clear map you can draw here, where the workers on the moon are similar to the general Japanese workforce at this point in the early 80s, right? Generations have been digging their way out of World War II, just go to work, keep the economy running, all that kind of stuff. But now we're getting into the fabulous 80s. To go Mystery Science Theater, hey, it's the 80s. Let's do a lot of coke and vote for Ronald Reagan. But it's this time of great prosperity and so forth. And folks are kind of like, why are we working so hard? Like why are we keeping this whole economy running? Earth is, the obvious thing is the Earth is the U.S. because they're all blonde or silver-haired. But I think more directly, they are basically the expectations of Japan, right? Like we need to be seen to be this technologically advanced country with a strong economy, and that just kind of shackled the common worker of Japan to 20-hour workdays.
Right.
And so, seen through that lens,
and also rapacious use of resources in order to fuel that
economy. Yep, absolutely. And this sort of universal middle class, right? Everyone's basically the same level,
right?
Except for the aristocrats. And so on that level, again, the ending kind of makes sense because there is no solution, right? Like you can't just wave a magic wand and solve labor's problems or solve management's problems. It's a long, difficult problem, whatever. And the issue with that is that it doesn't even address that. I would find this interesting. Where again, there's some philosophical stuff around. Metropolis, the end of Metropolis, the original 22 film. The mind and the heart must meet through the hands. Or no, the mind and the hands must meet through the heart. Right. You need balance between the two extremes. And Dallas is just like, no, everything's meaningless, and life goes on. Goodbye.
Yeah. And then after the end credits,
such a message of hope.
Yeah,
it's like drinking malt liquor. My God.
Sadness and rage.
Sadness and rage.
Anger, sadness, sleep, and rage.
Here we go. And again, it's difficult because there are all these. it's like seeing a great artist that hasn't figured out perspective yet. And like really needs to figure out perspective. And it's like your paintings have all this energy and verve and interesting ideas behind them, but I can't understand them at all. And you just need to turn the corner, you know, just do the thing. Well,
the good news is this was 1983.
Mm-hmm.
And they did figure out how to get the corner turned. They did move on. Well, she moves on, the industry moves on, and we live in this golden age now.
And you're absolutely right.
Not 1983.
And it should be pointed out, you know, we've been going back through a lot of these historical anime, and, you know, a lot of longer form storytelling up to this point are very rocky. You know, anime had not figured this out yet.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. This is very much a part of its time, and trying to figure out just kind of how to do it all. Yeah.
Which is great because I mean, like anything, like any kind of archaeology, is like you dig down through the layers to figure out what was the bedrock.
Yeah.
You know, how did they work? How do they work out stacking the first set of stones and then getting them to stay together, that you could build something out of the base elements?
Yep.
So yeah, entirely Dallos in its 1983 fury. Amazing. The 21st century, it's not so kind.
Yeah.
Yes. It just slaps Dallas.
Yeah. No, I agree. You know.
It's 1983. Do you realize how long ago that was?
Shut up.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, so we come a long way in those many decades.
In 5 years, it'll be the 50th anniversary of the original Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
Or 6 years, I guess. Yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
All right. That'll do it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll take a quick break for just a few minutes, then we'll be back to talk about some more modern anime. Some stuff going on right now.
We'll come forward to the 21st century.
As I need the music to play me off dramatically to go to the toilet.
Exactly.
So.
And YouTube's not going to allow that. So.